right, good morning. Thank you so much for coming and letting me talk about my favorite topic, which is recruiting. So let's do a quick pulse check. I want to get a sense of who's here. Oh, turn that on.
Top. Oh, top.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
Okay, can you hear me okay? All right. So I want to actually start with a quick pulse check and see who's here. Raise your hand if you're coming from a startup maybe under 25, so really early stage. Okay, actually a lot of people in the room. Next tier, maybe 25 to 100. Okay. Anybody here from a really big company of 100 or more? Okay, a few. Okay. How about any full-time recruiters or people ops? Okay, a few. And I'm guessing the rest of us are hiring managers, interviewers. Okay, great. Anybody hiring right now? Other teams? Everybody? Okay, great. We're in the right place. Because this is what we're talking about, the #1 challenge of business leaders. Survey after survey, every startup founder seemingly saying hiring is really their #1 problem. And today I'm going to show you how to make recruiting your competitive advantage, specifically in this context of growing startups, because recruiting for a large company, 1,000+ enterprise, super different when you are a scrappy team that doesn't have the brand recognition, the resources, or not even people to do everything that you need to do. So here's our agenda for today. I'll give some introductions on both a little bit more on why I'm so passionate about recruiting, but also the problem that we're talking about, the challenge. Then I'll actually talk about the old playbook, the one that we are trashing, because I really do think it's important to look backwards and kind of figure out why are we here, why are we struggling with these things. And then we'll get to the fun stuff. Here is hopefully a new human-centered way of recruiting that's going to make it a lot more fun for you as well as effective. And lastly, I'll do a deep dive on some solutions, some things that I think I would highly recommend, but also, inspirational and, trigger some new ideas of your own as well. And hopefully we'll have some time for a Q&A afterwards. So, I am an unabashed recruiting nerd, even though that's so not one of the cool ones in the Valley. But it's so important. Every company, it's so important to get this right. My personal mission is helping build better organizations so that we can all have more fulfilling work and really apply ourselves to our personal missions and interesting problems that really need our strengths. I was most recently on the leadership team at Lever, which you might have heard of. Any Lever users in the room? Okay, maybe we're too small. Okay, a few, great. Which is hiring software. I had joined as employee number 6 in 2014 and went through a variety of roles in customer success, product, chief of staff, head of recruiting, and also HR. And it was about 150 when I left a few months ago. I left though because, as much as I love the company, and you'll see why in a second, I left because I wanted to work a little bit more broadly and work with more startups to really scale and share what worked so well for us at Lever, because I do believe that this is a challenge that almost every startup faces, but we can really learn from each other here. Another really cool thing about Lever is that I had a pretty unique environment. I was what we called the meta role, which is recruiting for a recruiting company, right? So unlike previous jobs where I feel like I had to spend a lot of time chasing interviewers to be like, can you please complete this form, and doing a lot of administrative work, I really had the backing of my entire team, right? Because the entire team understood and really cared about recruiting. So we got to do a lot of experimentation, things that were really ambitious and new and different that I don't know if I could have done anywhere else at the time. So really what I want to share today are some of these tactics and some of our philosophies around recruiting that, because I had the support and the collective brain power of my entire team with me, we got to come up with some really new things. Okay. So I am going to throw a lot at you. Again, this is all to really look at recruiting as a holistic challenge that we can all be so much better at, instead of having it be this really big challenge that's administrative and a chore, and really having it be strategic work, but also really fun, because it's really important. So this quote from Jim Collins is a good reminder that it's not just hiring, it's hiring the right people. And for resource-strapped startups that are starting from scratch, one hire, I'm sure all of you know, can make such a big difference, right? Both on the positive and the negative side. See, in startups, you all know this, everyone has to pull their own weight. And some team members can really end up being the game changers, the ones that make a huge difference to those 10x employees. How do you get them? On the flip side, cost of a mishire, I do think is also so vastly underestimated. And it's not just the salary, right? The amount of money you have to pay. It's the opportunity of cost of someone else could be in that job doing awesome work. It's the long-term cost of morale, the effect on the rest of your team, especially because when you're small, there's no room to hide. If you're a 10-person startup and one person isn't working out, we all feel it. So important to get it right. At the same time, though, I don't think this means we can't take smart bets, take risks in hiring. But what are some ways we can do to make sure we're making, again, the smart bets? And really learning from it. Because as a manager, as leaders of companies, as people ops professionals, this is our challenge. And what I hope to do is provide advice and tips and stories that are actually relevant to you. I think with recruiting advice, when you're doing research, finding best practices, you're actually going to find a lot of things that are from completely different contexts, right? Much larger companies with huge budgets, 50-person recruiting teams, we have a recruitment marketer, we have a sourcer on staff. You might not have any of those things. So I got to really be in the trenches of building recruiting at Lever from scratch. So really hope to share some of my secrets that I've literally never shared anywhere before that I hope you find useful. Okay. So let's talk about the old playbook and why it's not working and how it's been failing us. A little bit of a recruiting history to anchor us on where we are in the context. It's kind of crazy that how little has changed given how much has changed. So what I mean by that is, do you remember most of job seeking and job searching used to be done on newspapers? Not that long ago, right? But it's a completely different world that we're living in. So back in the newspaper era, pretty much all you had to do was post a posting, salary, job title, location, and those three things are pretty much everything you're optimizing for. Way more straightforward. And then came the internet. I don't know if we all remember monster.com, that era. Because we made it so easy to apply to jobs online, you could now feasibly apply to hundreds of jobs every day without any cost to you, which sounds great, but of course, what does it lead to? Huge volume, a ton of noise. So because information was now available and people could apply to so many more different things, job seekers got way more choice, and so did employers. And when things get competitive, what do? We have to make ourselves a lot more appealing to job seekers, and that's when a lot of startups, Google really leading the way, started throwing a lot of perks. Ping pong tables, nap rooms, catered meals, massages. We all know, we all have to do them now. I know, thanks Google. But now what's interesting, that now the trends that we're seeing is more and more job seekers are looking for way more than just perks and just having fun at work. Candidates are more seeking meaning. They're looking for missions to be a part of. And this kind of change in mindset of job seekers, it's actually really huge when we're talking about, 20, 30 years max? And our processes and the way we think about recruiting has not kept up with this change. So if I could explain the traditional hiring process in one graphic, it's this funnel. Not quite to scale because I think the resume box should be way bigger, but couldn't fit it in. We're talking about lots of volume. We're talking about unmanageable number of resumes. And even for successful searches, it's said about maybe 300 resumes are required for one hire. And that's, again, the average. It can be a lot more for specific roles, or maybe a lot less for certain types of roles. I think this volume problem really represents the #1 trap that I'm seeing that most hiring teams fall into, getting lost in it. The noise really is our enemy here because volume may not have anything to do with whether you can actually hire great people, which is your goal, especially for startups. So the focus should really be on quality, not quantity. But all these resume feeders, one-click job postings, it's really making all of us, it's making our job so much harder. Another aspect that I'll add is this kind of idea of totally separated out evaluate and sell stages. Because we're so caught up in the vetting process, right? Getting through this volume, archiving people, looking at every resume, we actually forget that we want to make sure the people that we want to hire also want to come join us, right? But we're just so busy. I think one really unfortunate thing that I found is a lot of really great candidates don't end up clearing this process. What I mean by that is your actually process is when it's designed to work with volume, not quality, it ends up turning away the very people that you actually want, right? I'll get to that in a second, but we really need to kind of keep in mind that our goal is hiring great people, not getting to the inbox 0 equivalent of hiring. It's really tempting though. So luckily for us, I do think that the winds of change are kind of blowing on multiple fronts right now. On candidate side, the corporate ladder is mostly gone. People are job seeking, job hopping more than ever. There's some pros and cons to that, but really the higher expectations, I mean, we've really got to bring our A games. Lazy recruiting does not work anymore. What's interesting is millennials are really a sign of things to come. So some statistics, by 2025, not that long from now, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. And we've all heard the articles, the stories about millennials, but what's interesting is that by large majorities of them have way different motivations than generations before. 80% said that they expect businesses to have genuine purpose. 78% are looking for values fit. Similar numbers are saying they would actually voluntarily take a pay cut to work for a socially responsible company. This is great for startups that are very mission driven because people want meaning. It's no longer about just the pay, the benefits, and ping pong tables. On the company side, which is what I've been on for a while, some signs that I'm seeing that are actually very encouraging is the legitimacy and the respect, increasing respect as recruiting as a function. Recruiting jobs are super in high demand, recruiters are in really high demand right now. Every startup is trying to hire great recruiters. They just literally aren't enough of them to go around. So really great recruiters get paid just as much as engineers. What used to be seen as a very straight, administrative function has become a lot more of a strategic partnership so that company leaders are really placing a lot of emphasis because they have realized that investing in recruiting is one of the best, most important things you can do to ensure the success of your company. Another aspect of it is that recruiting used to be a very volume-driven, large company structure, but more and more I'm finding startups, early-stage founders really interested in this topic, and even investors like True really dedicating the space for this. This is great. We all need to learn. So I talked about why the old way hasn't worked. Now let's talk about what else is possible and how we can break away from what everybody else has been doing so far. So to introduce this topic, I'm going to ask to do a quick pair share. So I'm going to ask you in a second to get into pairs. I want you to think about the moment when you realized you wanted to join your current company. For founders in the room, we can talk about a different job that you loved in the past. But I want you to be really specific, right? So not just like, oh, I just love the people. Like, okay, what conversation made you think that? Or what interaction? It could have been even before you applied. So maybe like something about a blog post that you read, or the brand, or an interview you read from the founder. Something that made you say, man, if I get an offer, I will probably accept. Okay? So think about it. Get into pairs, maybe 2 minutes. Take 2 minutes to share each, and I'll come back. I'm just curious, did anyone join because of their company's perks and their cool ping pong table? All right, thank you for being honest. Actually, did anyone hear a really cool story from their partner that they're actually willing to share with the group? Anyone? Feeling brave? We didn't have any cool stories?
I mean,
please.
Cool stories that from like meeting the founder to signing a contract in a 5-day span. I think it's fascinating. Like how impactful sort of like founders can be at communicating the vision and the story.
Okay, so a really fast turnaround, that investment, really communicating the vision and getting really excited about it. That's not about right? Okay. Yeah, if we had the time, I would love to hear every single story. I could talk about it for a long time. But the pattern that I'm finding from the people over and over again, it's about people, right? It's about the opportunity to grow and learn with awesome people, working on hard problems, being part of something bigger, something that's worthwhile. And that's really what we want to anchor our new playbook on. How do we scale these moments? How do we put them in the forefront? Instead of being victims to process and volume, these stories that we all just talked about, how do we design our recruiting processes around these? Like I mentioned, because lazy recruiting that's very volume-based doesn't work anymore. We have to fight for every single candidate. And the candidates, the theme is consistently, everybody wants to grow and learn while being surrounded by good people, while being part of something bigger. Leadership, team, mission, and the opportunity to grow. So as companies, what we have to do, as employers, we have to shift from this volume mindset to a lot more human-centric. What do people actually want? How can I provide it for them? How do I communicate my message? And by doing this, we're going to deliberately shape and strengthen our pipeline so that we're truly focusing on quality, not just the number of resumes that we're getting in. I really want you to hear this and remember it far beyond this presentation, because it's something that once I realize it and I internalize it, game changer. So a couple concepts. Top talent, however you define it, but let's just say the people that we're really trying to hire. One, they're different for every company. So just because, they worked at Google, Facebook, went to Stanford, MIT, whatever, doesn't mean they're actually going to be great for you. We have to define what works for our companies and really deliberately look for them and evaluate them. And again, just because they worked at this really prestigious company or school or whatever, doesn't mean they're going to be automatically great. And that is great because we don't have to compete for the same people, right? We can find top talent, whatever that means to us, and really target our searches towards them. Second one, it's really, really key, I think. Top talent is actively job searching very infrequently and for much narrower windows of opportunity, okay? If we all had to quit our jobs today, right now, or let's say we all got fired, and we had to job search right now, we would be approaching our job searches, our own job searches, very differently than what we expect our candidates to do currently. So let's do a quick example. Let's say the person that you want, an engineer, is a top engineer at a large company, like top 5%. Number one, they're infrequently job searching. Why? Because their company, their employer knows it, right? She's probably getting tasked on the best projects. She has her choice of team and manager. She's got influence built up. She knows the inner workings of the company. So for her, job searching, it takes a lot of cost trade-offs. And let's be real, she's probably getting paid a lot because the company doesn't want to lose her. People choose to make choices to leave when the trade-offs make it worth it. So for a lot of people, it's not something you want to do often. People want to stay at companies, and job searching is not something where man, I'm so excited to do this. And that's why it also goes for narrower windows of opportunity, right? In that if you are truly that great, amazing engineer that everybody loves, one, she probably has in her head some companies that she wants to reach out to, right? Like a mental shortlist. If you're not on that shortlist, your chances of getting hiring her super low, right? Let's say you were lucky to actually be on a shortlist, have some kind of interaction or relationship. Then you have to go through like actually clearing the process. And number one thing that I find startups do is, like, oh, we don't have the infrastructure built yet. Like, how do we evaluate? Who should talk to her? Like, is there a job description? How do we even, complete interview feedback? So it gets really slow. Like, are we supposed to call references? Like, what actually goes into putting together an offer? So that you end up losing great candidates because she'll be like, oh, I love you guys, but I got this great offer. I'm just going to accept it. And you're going to be like, well, wait, but we were just about to. She's like, sorry, right? So remembering this, the people that you're looking for, very infrequent job searchers, very picky, and then also doing it for a lot shorter periods of time. This isn't to say, if you are searching frequently or if you are taking a longer time, you're not a great candidate. Of course not. It's just that by deliberately designing your process to grab these people, you will end up catching the people that are actively looking, right? But make sure you're actually talking to the best available pool available to you, not just who's literally applying to your careers page right now. That's where the volume comes in. So here's how you get to it. On the left, we talked about this traditional funnel where resumes and volume are just pouring at you in waves. What we want to do is build in a new step. So instead of looking at your funnel as it starts when they start a resume, your funnel actually starts way sooner. You're looking at all kinds of would-be applicants, of which there are a number, and these people are the ones that are, again, job seeking very infrequently and also a lot faster. The sales and marketing people in the room know the quality of your leads is what matters, right? Not the number of leads you have. You're actually looking for people that are going to convert, the people that are going to convert to each stage to lead to a great hire. You want someone who's a good fit, ready to buy, ready to sign that offer letter. And it looks like a little bit more work, right? You have to add a whole new stage. But really investing in this blue stage of would-be applicants, strengthen your pipeline, and make sure you're working with the right people and not wasting your time. So that's the new playbook. Let's get into a little bit more tactical and some concrete things you can implement. Given what we know, what do we do about it? So like I mentioned, I was recruiting for a recruiting company. And what we got to do with my team was really take this product development mindset that we were taking to lever the product to our own internal processes. And because we got to think creatively and experiment and iterate constantly, the number of things that I got to do with my team at Lever that are really unique, I think, invented from scratch, and ended up making a huge difference. I had really awesome partners, in my CEO, Sarah, and we were just constantly iterating. I do have some of these, different talks I've given, different blog posts I've written on my website. You're welcome to find them. And this looks like a lot, but trust me, you don't have to do all of them. Recruiting is just like an organizational muscle you're building over time. You got to start somewhere. Again, Lever, we have to start from scratch. But what I want to do is really focus on the areas that I think are the highest ROI for you. Given the limited time, here is where I would start. And these are the 3 areas. 1 is really work on that, again, top of the funnel. Start your authentic employer brand. 2 is engage in some out-of-the-box, untraditional sourcing. And then 3 is make sure you can close the people that you actually want, okay? See, we can optimize all the little things we want, but if our pipeline isn't strong, if we're not talking to the right people, it won't really matter. It's not gonna get you great candidates. I'm in a bunch of recruiting groups and Slack channels and whatnot, and there's a lot of activity and flurry about does anyone know about this really obscure Chrome extension that's promising this hack, or does anyone know this job board? I'm like, yeah, they're important, but they're tools. They can't be driving our strategy. I really truly believe that this has to be the anchor of your recruiting strategy, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is find the best people, get them excited about opportunities, and then actually get these offer letters signed. So let's do a deep dive on a few of these. So employer brand. It's a little bit of a buzzwordy term, but it's actually really straightforward. Employer brand is an umbrella term for the interaction, the impression that your would-be candidates really publicly have about you. So just like how your companies and products and services have a brand that's public, you also have a brand about your you as an employer, as a place to work. It encompasses things like your careers page, all your social media activity. It could be your Glassdoor page, career fair presence, events you're doing. It's also like what other people say about you. It's what your employees say to their friends, what other people that you don't even know are saying to each other about your company. It's the collective impressions. So there's a lot of way to work on employer brand, but my preference is to really work on the blog. It costs almost nothing to start a blog, and we can all do it. I'm really pushing this blog because it is the #1 thing that I think startups are really not realizing the full potential of. So hopefully by the end of this section, I inspire you to create a blog. But the old playbook, employer blog, it doesn't sound very exciting. I mean, I personally am not going around like, what's PG&E's employer blog, publishing nowadays, or what's insert large company, doing? We only our association with employer blogs and content is like, if I'm actually looking for a job there, right, I'm trying to get answers. It's not something I seek out. So something we realized at Lever was, what if we were able to create a blog that people would find useful no matter what, even if you're not looking for a job with us, so that in the long run, they come to associate us with, for us, it was, career advice, different ways of inclusive company building, how to build in culture. And for you, it'll be different, right? Whatever is special about your team, your company, being able to share stories around that and have it be useful for others, right? So the old playbook is all about this very salesy, apply for a job today. But again, if you remember, the top talent, the job seekers you're looking for, they might not be looking today. So by forcing this call to action on them, they're like, oh, this isn't useful for me. This isn't relevant for me. Instead, we went for authenticity, telling stories about here's what it's like to work for an early stage startup. Here are the lessons that we're learning, so that it's actually useful to a far wider audience. Let's see. A couple of types of benefits that come from creating content and really investing in it. So there's the practical matters, right? So maybe there's think about the candidates on the fence about applying. When you're job searching, there's 20 tabs open and 20 job descriptions you're looking at. You're kind of trying to close down as many tabs as possible. You're eliminating mode. What can you do to make sure they keep that tab open and they actually come and talk to you? This is where profiles, the meet the team stories, here's what we're all about, they can be really engaging. I'll show you some examples. But what you're doing is you are putting yourself out there. Here's what we stand for. Here's what we care about, before they commit their valuable time to you, right? Really make it worth time. Long term, though, also brand building, building trust with your job seekers, getting people positive associations with your company so that they'll share with their friends. And this is a much more effective way, letting other people do your work for you and spreading opportunities. Because great people, one of the most important sources where they hear about opportunities is for their friends. So here's an example of a blog post that it's written by some friends of mine at this company, Job Portraits. They were working for Instacart. They're an employment brand agency. They heard this feedback from a recruiter. We had been trying to recruit a really awesome data scientist who was not responding to our emails. But we invested in this blog post. He read it, and he said, okay, I'm ready for an interview now. This is exactly the type of content that you're going for. Putting human faces behind job descriptions. Giving a sense of here's what it's like to work here. Here are the challenges that we're solving. Here's the type of people we're looking for in human terms. Of course, I have to include some examples from Lever. This is a blog post that I collaborated with a sales rep who was really brave enough to share his experiences of being gay and also having been very severely discriminated in previous workplaces. So we wrote this story on finding a company that encourages me to embrace my identity. And we started getting in cover letters and feedback this quote, something like this. Reading this blog post, I nearly burst into tears. This is a kind of genuinely welcoming and inclusive place that I want to build up. For me, this was like the biggest compliment ever, because what corporate blogs can make people cry? That was a new one. I actually have multiple screenshots of people, not just this blog post, others saying, even if it doesn't work out, I'm so glad I found this blog post. I'm so glad I got to read this post because it started a conversation about myself and my career. Another one, this is kind of a look into what onboarding at Lever looks like. And then we got a piece of feedback. I wasn't sure if I should be applying to startups. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to keep up. But reading this post gave me the confidence to try. If this is how Lever prepares new hires, I can do it. Again, really, really powerful. Thinking about who's not applying to you, who's not in your active pipeline yet, and just needs a little bit of that push. How can you engage someone to commit and invest their time with us and really engage in a conversation? So what's tricky about this is sometimes you have to anticipate your target audience's needs and answer their questions, even if you can't hear them, right? Because unless they're in the active pipeline, we're not actually directly engaging with them, right? But you want to work with as many people as possible that could be good, whether they're actively in your pipeline or not. A couple more companies that I think are doing a really good job on this, again for inspiration, is Buffer. They're all about transparency, openness. They're also a fully remote team. So what they do with their blog is constantly blog about it. They share very openly, here are our challenges, here's what we're making mistakes, here's what we did instead, and it really strengthens their brand because other people that are interested in this kind of working environment, they go seek it out, and they over time get a really favorable impression of Buffer, so that when Buffer is looking for, insert position, they get such a qualified pipeline of candidates that they wouldn't get otherwise. Asana is really another good one, where they're taking this blog to tell stories about what's special about them and what they care about. So I share these again as inspiration, not necessarily expectations for what I want you to ship today, because you're actually seeing projects that are years in the making, right? To be honest, the Lever blog that I started in 2014, I dragged my feet on it for months. I knew I wanted to start it, but I was so intimidated by it. I actually had to build it into one of my OKRs because I gotta make it happen. But once I got going, it became so much easier. Your first couple blog posts will be the hardest. But once you actually start seeing the feedback in terms of your team, what you're hearing from them, how useful immediately is in recruiting, I guarantee you the momentum will build. But yeah, the first two are really, really hard. You just gotta do it. So the future of recruiting is going to be emotionally engaging content, and that's through storytelling. You might say those blog posts are nice, but they're kind of cheesy. They're a little bit more touchy-feely than I'd like. I don't think I'm really into them. Fair. But again, we're trying to have these spread, have these be useful, have them contribute to a much longer term brand building. So even if you personally are not excited about these topics, this is how you get them shared by others. This is how you get remembered and really rise above the noise, right? Storytelling. Candidates are ready for it, and we have to be the ones to provide it. So moving into action. Where do you get your ideas? Talk to people. Talk to your team. Do not go at this alone. I tried. It was hard. Employees, ask your newly hired people, hey, why did you want to join? Ask them the question that I asked you. What was the moment when you were sold on your joining your company? When did you know? Why? What was the specific moment? Take that story and amplify it however you'd like. Make it so that others can read it and be like, wow, that's really cool. I kind of want to experience something like that. Ask your candidates, what compelled you to apply, right? What was it about us that made you submit your application? Ask them. and figure out what's working so you can amplify it, do more of it, make sure it's more visible. I think another really easy way to do this is whatever's special about your team, whatever traditions you have, what's unique, write a blog post, take some photos, write a blog post. I've heard companies doing, like tea time on Fridays. Okay, like what happens there? Why did it start? Why do employees like it? You can also ID your target customer. So again, kind of like think about that maybe person that's on the fence, right? Maybe I'll apply, maybe I won't. What's stopping them? What stories can we tell them to really push them over the edge? So if I could compel you to commit to one action, publish one post this quarter, and then send it to me for homework. No, because I would really love to see more companies telling their authentic stories. And it's going to up-level all of us. It's going to make things better. Job seekers, recruiters' jobs so much easier. Some really easy formats to get started. Interviews with different members of your team. Crowdsource Q&As. So example will be, there's like a National Managers Day coming. I noticed that it was coming up, so I picked 3 members of the team, like, hey, you love your manager. We sat down for 10 minutes. I asked them a bunch of questions, why they love their manager. I wrote it down, took a photo, boom, blog post. Like that easy. Crowdsource, different questions. Photo posts can work really well. Hiring stories are really, really popular, right? If someone had a particularly interesting or unique story, like that 5-day hiring spree, I'm sure there's a really cool, interesting story in there. Explaining your interview process. Whatever you can do to provide transparency and an idea of what people will be getting into. To assure them hey, we're gonna make it worth your time. And hopefully the goal is, by engaging with us, it'll be productive either way. All right, so I'm gonna go into the next section, which is out-of-the-box sourcing. Raise your hand if your company is doing some sourcing, basic reach outs, starting to send some emails. Yeah, okay, I have half the room. So I'm gonna assume that we understand kind of the basics of sourcing, right? Which is send emails, hey, we're looking for this kind of person. Would you like to get on the call? But because this is a mastery course, I wanna talk about what is out of the box. So what again is different and hopefully a higher ROI for startups who don't have a lot of time to create these huge volume sourcing campaigns. So the old playbook of sourcing looks like this. Very straightforward, very need-based, depending on what your needs are right now, what requisitions you have open. So we need to hire a marketing manager. I open up LinkedIn, search for marketing manager in insert city, and I mass spam all these people that come up. See some guilty nods in the room. Yep, I've been guilty. Nope, it's cool. But here's what we can do instead in this new playbook of candidate-centered sourcing. We're going to focus on a long-term relationship building and use tools like LinkedIn instead of just finding them, actually engaging with them over long term. Because remember, we're targeting the people that are infrequently job searching, not who's available right now, okay? Again, this is so different where startups and large companies differ. A sourcer that I know at a large company told me, my job is to basically praying that one of my emails catches someone on a bad day at work. I'm like, okay, fair. Just basically to get someone to take a call because they had a really bad meeting with their manager or something. But if you're trying to find someone that's a really good fit for your startup, that's mission-driven, that's really hungry for that building, might not be the best way to do it, right? So the alternative I'm finding is the long-term play. Because honestly, some of the best people at Lever, it took me 2-3 years to hire. And I'm hearing that consistently at companies like Slack, saying oh yeah, some of our best hires, some of our key employees, 5+ years to hire. I actually still get texts from Lever, even though it's been a few months since I left. We just hired an engineer that you sourced back in 2015. Multiple people have actually reached out to me and be like, hey, we emailed, I just joined Lever, I'm so sorry, I'm bummed we didn't get to overlap. This is something that once you plant seeds, you can harvest many years down the road. It's just that you have to plant seeds. You've got to have something to harvest. What I'm going to do is break this down, how I was able to reach some of this feedback, and really share some specific tips that, again, I've never shared publicly before. So thinking long term. Old school sourcing is, again, thinking about getting this job filled today. What we want to do instead is engage in a conversation, and the goal is to get them in the future when they're ready. And we actually can't predict when that will be. Something I realized was that most people are very open to LinkedIn requests. I accept LinkedIn requests even if I don't know them. Actually, a lot of people do. Very few people are like, I only accept people that I know. So what I would do is I would find interesting profiles, people that are doing interesting work. I would just friend them and just be like, hey, love your profile, no ask. Right? Because what we usually do is like, can you get on a call? And then their answer is no. It's a default no. But what we do is by getting that friend request accepted, we're actually on each other's feeds. So what I would do is build this network of strangers. But then I would post maybe once a week, every other week, something about Lever or something that we're doing. Here's a milestone that we've reached. Here's a blog post that one of the examples that you got to see. So that over time, their impression of you changes. I would post career development articles that have nothing to do with Lever. Here's a fun photo of a team dinner. A little story here. Maybe this is how we do all. Here's a photo of our all hands celebrating this. They start to get familiar with you. So yeah, it's not a strategy that pays off immediately, thinking long term, but it's worked. The number of people have reached out to me, again, months, years later, to be like, yeah, can we talk about Lever? And I'm like, maybe, yeah. Yeah, we can do that. Let's see. So then the next thing I do is actually get creative in finding the right people. So again, instead of going straight for the jugular, I need a marketing director. Let me search for marketing directors. Something I would do is reverse engineer profiles. So I noticed that, for example, customer support, our product ops people, some of our best employees are strong writers. So I would look for keywords like writing, and I would look for profiles that were expressive in writing. I'm like, you're gonna be my LinkedIn friend. I would search for literally words like mission-driven. I would search for empathetic. I would search for passionate about customer experience, different phrases that wouldn't come up in a normal search of here are the 5,000 engineers in the valley. I want to find the best people that are going to convert for me. So whatever the qualities are that you are looking for, define what makes for a successful employee for that function, for that team, for this culture. Look for them and just start building a brand. And remember that it's not just about that person, right? It's about their friends. It's about every connection that they have so that they get to work for you. So what's weird is sometimes in sourcing, what's most effective is not always measurable. So, we started getting a lot of, what compelled you to apply? People answering, oh, my friend told me about it. And I have no way of tracking which friend. And this is a long-term game. This is a brand building that comes to it. All right. And then lastly, offer before you ask. So instead of asking for a call immediately, offering articles. I have a career coaching background, so I'll just say if you want to grab coffee and talk about your career, let's do it. That turns into real interviews later. If you are an engineering leader and you find a really great profile of an up-and-coming engineer, if you ever want to chat about career, I'm happy to share my experiences. Instead of can you come in for an interview, right? By them getting to know you, much more likely to actually become an active candidate later on. A few other tactics. I've actually been on the receiving end of a calibration interview. This is a trick that recruiters play that works, which is when you open up a role, you reach out to the best people possible, saying we're looking for, let's say a head of talent. And we just want to talk to good people to understand the role. And you end up, talking to the founder. You're like, oh, this is a really cool job actually. Maybe I want to apply to it. Right? So seek to learn instead of immediately asking people to interview. Because if you ask me to interview, my answer is no, because I'm busy. We all are. during interviews, this is something that we found that was already built into our process. Asking people, what was the best environment you've ever worked in? Like, who were some standout managers? During reference calls, I've actually gotten candidates from reference calls. If I'm really impressed by someone during a reference, I'm like, yeah, we should keep in touch for when you inevitably someday want to leave your current job, because we all do. And then lastly, anytime you're at an event, anytime you're anywhere, note people that are working it. There was someone that I hired for our product team. He was working at a different HR tech company, working at an event. He was just so enthusiastic and personable and so, really knew the product inside out, was so passionate about the mission. I was like, we should grab lunch. I hired him 2 years later. Because this kind of enthusiasm, you can't really screen for. The cool thing about like trade shows and conferences is that they don't really send terrible reps to these. So like by engaging with them, yeah, tell me about your product. Looking out for the ones that are super enthusiastic, even if they're not getting paid directly for it. That's the type of people you're looking for. Always be closing, right? ABC. All right, and the last part. As a final kind of part to our solutions, the highest ROI. So we talked about kind of like this focus on the top of the pipeline, really making sure you're finding the right people, engaging the right people. How do we actually talk about getting hires, which is our goal at the end of the day? I think the trap that we're falling into, again, is we get thinking that evaluation and selling are completely different stages, when really selling starts way sooner than you think, right? We definitely have made this mistake before. Should we hire? Do we want to hire? And then you get to the offer stage. Okay, now we should start trying to make sure we charm them and make sure they accept the software. And they're like, well, I have all these questions, and these other startups have been selling me way longer. So you're starting from behind, right? The goal is every single person that's actively interviewing with you, they feel like, one, they had the environment to really give it their best shot. And two, they leave with a favorable impression of you. So candidate experience, whether you might have heard of this term or not, it's a little, again, buzzwordy, but straightforward. It's everything that goes into all the factors that make into your offer more likely to be accepted. So it could be, obviously what you get in terms of title, the job description you see. Obviously you need to have the table stakes of the right salary, benefits, but it's everything else also around it, which is, how it felt walking into your company. Every single touch point, every single person that they talked to. What was the recruiter communication like? Did they have to sit around waiting for 3 weeks where's the follow-up from the recruiter? That's not a great candidate experience. What you're doing here is proving yourself that you're a good match for the candidates, because every top talent are going to have multiple options. You also want to put in the work to make sure the right people want you. So there's standard follow-ups, making sure you are prompt in your communication, because, ooh, that went away. Here we go. Candidate experience and employer brand are actually a cycle, right? So think about candidate experience as a direct experience that every single person has with your company. Employer brand is that one-to-many. What you do with individuals feed upon your overall impressions. Something that Leverage CEO, her philosophy or insight was what? As a startup, this was when we were 10 people. No one knows about us. There's no reason to interview with us. So what we're going to do is interviewing with us should be like test driving a Tesla. In that, well, this was 2014 when Teslas were a little bit less common. Back then, though, everybody wanted to test drive. Even if you're not a car person, even if you're not in the market for a car, you would kind of be open to it, right? So how do we make that white glove experience, make it worth their time, and design the experience around it? Take what would be pain points for a traditional job search process, and really make it so that they're learning about themselves, so that it's we're converting them into moments of delight instead of chores. So some of the things that we came up with, I'll explain in a second, but I also want to give some examples of the results of this work. On the left here is Gloria, an engineer who was actually referred to us by a friend who interviewed for the same job, was turned down, but he loved his experience so much, he actually referred her to us, right? That's what you're going for. On the right here is Azias, a fantastic engineer who got an offer really early days at Lever, turned it down because he had a time-exploding offer somewhere else before he got to offers with us, or before he got to late stages with us. But when that startup got acquired a year later, actually came back and joined. We asked him why. Because during his first process, he was coached by our CTO, who treated him like a human being, not just like an engineer, and actually gave him advice on how to think about engineering career. Here's how to evaluate different options. Really communicating like, we want what's best for you. Not necessarily, even if that's not our position, like that's what we want you to take. And that's what made him to come back. He said, as an engineer, I thought it was all about cool technical problems, but as I, been in a few startups, I realized it's all about the people, right? Going back to our original question, it's always about the people. And that's really the key of candidate experience. I think this is something that everyone should do. So if you haven't put together an interview guide / packet yet, here's a really good project that you can start on immediately. Really thinking about how difficult and anxiety-inducing interviewing can be. Because you go to your startup every day, you go to your office every day, you know exactly where to park, you know how the elevators work, you don't need to be greeted. But it's real hard for interview candidates. What does it feel like to get lost? Because your building is really hard to find, actually. The public transit. When they walk into the office and there's no one at the desk and you're just like, I'm here for an interview, what do I do? Making sure everything is built in. I think Stripe does a really good job of really clearly communicating, here's our interview process. They have these sections called, here's how to prepare for this type of interview. Here's how we evaluate this interview. So that every person going for the interview really feels like they got their best shot, right? So overall, thoughtfulness goes a really, really long way here. Detailed instructions. What does it feel like to be on the other side of the table? Another really cool one that we did at Lever, you're totally welcome to adapt. It's this thing called a round table question, okay? So we still do, eat together as a team at lunch every single day. And the really early days, there was this moment when we were like 10 people, and an engineer came who was interviewing with us. And all the other engineers kind of like crowded this person and started like talking to them about technical concepts. And myself and our sales rep at the time were like, we want to talk to this person too. Like, we want to get to know this person too, because we're so small at the time. So what we ended up coming up with was this thing called roundtable question that would just go around. It's a really simple question, and some of them are really silly, but it's a really way to get to know people, right? The entire team, especially if you're small, or maybe you're like just that one immediate team you'll be part of. This is really fun because I think employees actually ended up loving it just as much as the candidates. So we would just do it even on non-interview days. We would get like inside jokes coming out of it. We would like learn things about each other that would never have come out. Some of these answers that we consistently got out. And there's a whole blog post about this that you're welcome to check out. And more questions, how to run this. But another like huge part of candidate experience was interviewing is exhausting, right? You're like at an on-site for 6 hours. We're just like drilling you with questions, and we noticed that people couldn't eat during lunch, right? So roundtable was like a really simple way of like, you can listen 80% of the time, and it's still like super entertaining, right? Little things. Because you want to showcase the best part of your culture and make sure outsiders can see it. And that's what the candidate experience is all about. We had like really epic quarterly kickoffs. We would invite late stage candidates to come see them, and they would actually get to experience, here's what it would be like to actually join the team. We can tell you about it, or you can see it yourself. So whatever that your teams are doing that's special, that employees love, make sure the candidates have access to it as well. So the candidate experience doesn't end when you're interviewing. This is what you get when you sign an offer letter with Lever. See, we realized that it can be kind of deflating, right? When you just sign an offer letter, you're like, oh, yay, we joined. But at Lever, what you would do is you get one of these in the mail. These are our famous welcome gifts. You might have actually seen them before. And this moment of, we're so excited to have you. I've actually had a few employees tell me they were so touched. Like one person said she started crying on BART when she saw this. And guess what? They show them to their friends. They share it on social media. They talk about, man, I am so excited to join company. These are the moments of delight you're looking for. You can totally steal this. You should totally steal this. They're awesome. Everybody loves them. Yeah. Again, there's another blog post that it's linked on the resources page. All right, I'm going to start wrapping up here. So invest in the candidate experience because people are going to remember. A couple of years ago, I talked to a person who was not in startups, so we were looking at an IT role, and the role ended up getting filling, but he reached out to say, hey, like, that really changed how I think about my career. And that was the way I didn't know recruiter calls can be so human, which I felt bad about, like, what kind of recruiting calls have you been doing? Where he actually had left a comment on my LinkedIn for me. You know, it was a breath of fresh air. Well, I'm personally starting to see a change towards more human-centric recruiting. And he literally two days ago messaged me to say, like, yeah, like, that conversation was what led me to, he's now at Asana and doing really well. So these are the moments you're going for because these stories get shared. You might not hear about them, but they're definitely getting shared. So here's what we're looking at. The old playbook is this cycle of doom. We're looking at unmanageable volume, just huge unmanageable pipeline. So we don't have time to work on anything. Because we don't have time to actually make meaningful progress, improvements, we're keeping broken systems and doing what feels easy. And because we're doing things that are just contributing to volume, your quality of your pipeline stays low. And it just starts over and over again. Here's what we're proposing instead, which is by deliberately cutting down the noise and focusing on increasing the pipeline quality, you're actually going to have brain space. And this is really hard because some of the best recruiters that I know, friends of mine, tell me, yeah, we can't even look at the inbound resumes half the time because a lot of it is busy work. You know, it's a little bit unfortunate for better or worse, but that is a reality that we're looking at. Volume has become unmanageable, and the cycle can't be broken unless you all actually deliberately choose to recruit in this new way, right? It might look like more work. It takes investments. It takes longer. But what you don't want to do is get caught up again in this volume. So, in summary, if I can have you remember one thing, top talent is going to be very different. And the ones you're targeting are the ones that are actually very infrequently job searching and for a lot shorter windows of time. Design your process around them, not who's actually in front of you right now. By focusing on quality, not quantity, you can make sure your process works for you instead of against you. And this is a space, recruiting, where there's a ton of room for experimentation, right? Try things. Whatever worked for Lever for larger companies might not necessarily work for you. Try it, ship it, iterate, throw away things that don't work, amplify things that do, and that's how you build a recruiting muscle over the long term. And don't go at it alone. Get a team, form a task force, get help. So I'm going to start wrapping up here. So thank you so much for coming. If you want to continue to learn, I highly recommend these books. Jen, can you just give me like easy articles? No, because this is a problem that you have to really deeply understand. So these two are the books that probably had the most influence on my thinking about all of this. Highly recommend. Greg Brockman has a really great talk on really quality-based hiring. Another topic that I didn't even touch on, but I'm really super passionate about, is inclusive hiring, the diversity and inclusion aspect. I have a blog post about that. But overall, I would love to keep me posted on the progress. Send me your blog post that you write. Tell me what innovative things that you were able to ship. And I would love to continue supporting it on your journey. You can find my contact information there. And thank you so much for coming.